Mark Marmer is the owner and founder of Signature Electric, which has been in business for over 35 years. And over the last 9 years, they've been busy installing electric vehicle chargers in all types of settings, from retail locations to single family residences. Mark has a lot to say about EVs, and he's coming up next. Hi, Mark, and welcome.
Hi, I'm Maria. Nice to be together with you.
No, it's great. I was telling everyone in the intro about a little bit about your background. You've been in the electricity, the industry very, very long time. You've seen a lot of changes throughout the years. So, how has Signature Electric accommodated those changes?
Actually, you're right. I have been. I started in the trade when I was 18 years old, so you can see a little time has passed already. And we've been in business about 38 years. So if you can imagine back when we started, there was no really such thing as the internet. We were
Yeah.
using typewriters, carbon paper. When we got the first fax machine, it was like a really big deal when people got. So if you can even imagine that,
Wow.
and to where we are today with, say, electric vehicles and the material and equipments that are available now, and the because we're a fairly nimble company, we're able to sort of adapt to changes. We're really a service-based company, and one of the things I know that we're talking about today, which is of interest, is electric vehicles are making up about charging for electric vehicles has made up about 50% of our business now. So imagine 8 or 9
Mhm.
years ago, it was 0% of our business and we were doing just fine. And now it's making up 50%. So this has been a very interesting change. And there's all kinds of materials and things
Mhm.
that are available now. And even the changes, honestly, in the last, say, year in terms of the availability of different charging systems,
Yeah.
software and things that are happening with batteries, all these things simply didn't exist 8 or 9 years ago, or were very, very marginal. So this has been interesting, and for us, we love sort of complicated and interesting things here. So we're happy to be part of this. So we're and really worked out well. And I think people that work here you can hear a little bit of excitement in my voice, but people are excited to be part of this. And when new people come on board, they go, "Oh, this is something different and something interesting." I love being around this, which makes it a little easier for us to hire. And I think people that are happy, it radiates out to the customers. They get it.
They do. And because, let's talk EVs. There is a lot of excitement around the industry. There's also a lot of concern as well. But you have a really strong YouTube channel. And I took a couple of minutes and I went in and I watched your videos. Very helpful. You talk about a variety of topics, from batteries or charging infrastructure. You really drill down. Let's talk a little bit about your YouTube channel. Why are you doing this to educate?
First of all, you hit the nail on the head. I spend in this office, you would not believe the endless hours that are spent on the phone or on this kind of platform, explaining in detail how this works and how that works. And I think if I can just explain this once and it
Mm,
gets repeated hundreds of times without me having to, physically do it, it really is useful. And it's become part of the brand.
right.
I don't know that I saw it that way to begin with. I saw it as being just something useful. Let's explain this. Let's explain that. And some of these videos have stuck around for years and years and years. And some of the original ones are still getting an amazing amount of play. And you would be very surprised. First of all, people are, when I go to conferences and things like that, people are calling out to me in the hall on my way to the bathroom. "Oh, keep up the good work." Or people say, "Oh, Mark." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, do I know this person or I don't know?" Because they know me, but I don't know them. So it's been a very useful tool. And we're a little bit more, as we've grown, we've become a bit more strategic with how we
Mm.
use it, and the flavor has improved. But I think that homey feel that you feel and that excitement that I'm hoping is coming through when I speak to you, because it's genuine, it comes through in the videos as well. And people here, if I think if they would like me to do nothing but YouTube videos here, but I do contribute in other ways to the business.
It was wonderful. I really, and it's encouraged. You can tell people are just loving it. How And talking about EVs, when you first purchase one, it can be a little bit confusing and a bit intimidating. I guess you would agree, because you're going from a gas, powered engine to electric. How would you explain to somebody, the difference between a level one and a level two and a level three charger? Like, let's break that down just for people
Mhm.
who don't quite know.
No problem. So you've probably number one picked the. I never understood that this was going to be the most interesting video that we ever did. I just sat in a chair and talked for half an hour, and to this day, that's our top video, and that was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
Um, Listen, to begin with, we're kind of creatures of habit. We've been driving gasoline vehicles for a long time. We
Mhm.
kind of know how it works. We get the idea that we're doing oil changes and where to get gasoline. And it all has a very real level of comfort because that's sort of the human being part in us. And now you say, well, we'll have these electric cars. Well, okay, how will how will that be different? How will I charge it? And what have you? So just to begin with, that if you get to drive an electric vehicle, you will immediately notice a difference. The performance of the vehicle is different. The quiet of the vehicle is different. It does not feel the same, and it's a really nice feel. There's a lot of electronics in the vehicle that you didn't see in the other ones. But you're right. I went to the corner. I know where the nearest Esso station is in Toronto, and there's no problem. I'll fill my car up. But what am I going to do to get the electricity into this car? And most of the people that started had single family homes and had chargers at home, and that was very common. But you mentioned, so, and we're moving past that, and we can discuss it later if you have time. But you mentioned level one, level two, level three. This was something that got adopted early on, and I think it's frankly confusing. It
Hmm.
sounds like, because one, two, three sounds like okay, better,
Right.
best.
Good, better, best. Right.
But it's not really, that's not really the truth. So let's break it down for a minute so people can understand. Level one is frankly just plugging into a regular outlet. So the regular 120-volt outlet, the same way you plug in your toaster or your vacuum cleaner, that's what it is. Originally, vehicles came with this charger in the car, and you could just plug it in. Not every vehicle anymore comes with that, but they're available. They're not hard to get. And just to give you an idea, so that's charging at about 6 or 7 kilometers an hour. So you say, well, I don't know, that's like not really
Pretty
good. I'll plug
slow.
it in all night and I'll only regain 60 kilometers of range.
Right.
Well, first of all, you could have a plug-in hybrid that only has 50 kilometers of range. The car sits all night. Maybe it's perfectly fine for you.
Mhm.
Or you went to somebody's cottage and you stayed there for 3 days and never moved the car, in which case it's 60 kilometers. In 3 days, I'll have 180, 200, 250 kilometers, or even more than that, because it could stay 24 hours a day.
Right.
That might be perfectly
Enough to get home.
satisfactory. So there's a couple of use cases where it could be okay to use. Most people want a little faster charging than that. And this is where we get to the sort of level two. So both these chargers are taking alternating current, AC current from the plug, and the car itself is transforming it to DC and delivering it to the battery. So that's happening with level one and level two. So level two just means now that the charger is at 220 volts. So this would be similar to the feed in your house that might be for your stove or your dryer. That kind of size of feed is feeding it. And now we're getting, depending on what charger we put in, 30, 40, 50 kilometers of range per hour. Okay, so this is already sounding way better. I plug it in, and now my 100 or 200 kilometers that I drove yesterday are easily made up overnight, and I have a pretty quick charge. If I came back in the middle of the day, sat for a few hours, I might pick up enough to sort of manage the rest of the range. And frankly, it's just a great overnight charge. If I'm home for 8 or 10 hours, even a pretty big battery, my car has a almost 600 kilometers of range. So not that I use 600 in a day, but if I use 3 or 400, it'll easily make it up overnight. That's pretty typical of what goes into a single family house, and the cost is not extreme. The chargers, a whole installation with the chargers, maybe $1,500, $2,000. They're not all the same, but you get an idea. And that's pretty easy. If you have home charging, you're pretty much, and a decent range on your car, you're pretty much set for everything you do on in general. But let's assume that I'm going to come to visit you, or I want to go to maybe something a little more typical. I visit my brother in Ottawa, so that's a 4.5, 5 hour drive. My car that I have now could pretty much almost make it all the way.
Mm.
But the car that I had before had about 350 kilometers of range. I needed to make a stop. That's where I stopped at a DC fast charge or a level 3. This is what level 3 is. So
Right.
these are these bigger chargers that we see by the side of the road, maybe the size of a refrigerator, or the Tesla chargers that you're
Like a
used to
flow
seeing.
charger, a supercharger. Yeah,
Yep,
Tesla. Yeah.
exactly. All these words you're using are Flow is a manufacturer
Mhm.
and an operator, and these are all DC fast chargers. So the difference there is the energy is delivered in direct current directly to the battery much faster, and I may make up 300 or 400 kilometers of range in maybe 45 minutes or a half an hour. So there, and people would use those as their driving places, but even people that don't have home charging now, I'm finding that sometimes they're using these. So
Mhm.
they're working it into their schedule to sit for maybe half an hour once or twice a week, and they seem to be managing. I don't think it's yet ideal, but it's a stepping stone. We're kind of, part
Mm.
way there, and it gives people the ability. Frankly, when I got my first car, that would have been about 7 or 8 years ago. This would have been unthinkable. There just weren't enough chargers around to even consider doing this. And even going to Ottawa, I had to stop in Kingston because there wasn't anywhere really else to stop. And it worked out fine. And we had lunch, and it was a whole event.
Right.
Now I'll sometimes stop for 10 or 15 minutes, grab an ice cream or go to the washroom, and that's enough for me to
Yeah.
easily, comfortably make it my way to Ottawa. And then when I'm in Ottawa, I'll deal with how I'm going to charge there for the
Yeah.
return trip. So that's a level 1, 2, 3. So think about it, very slow, kind of the average charger, and even the level 2 chargers come anywhere from about 16 amps up to about 80 amps. We use them for fleets as well, because
Mhm.
at 80 amp, that's kind of the lower level for a DC fast charger. So, okay, I think I'd see if you can consume all
Well,
that
yeah, it is.
information.
Yeah, well, one would think that level 1 would be the best one, but it's
Oh,
not.
really?
You flip it around, right?
But I don't look at it as being best or better. They are suiting a particular need.
Mhm.
It fits fine, but get the right for us here. We want to hear what your situation is, and then we'll find the right solution. So, frankly, again, if you had a small battery and you said, I'll just plug it into the garage, it's fine. If you want to put sometimes when my daughter comes to my house, they'll plug into one of my chargers, and we'll go to the park and whatever. In a couple of hours, her car's topped up and she's thrilled.
Right.
So, she's using opportunity charging. She has no charging at home. She lives in an apartment building, and she uses chargers both at her work and her husband's work, and they don't drive more than about 50 kilometers. And she told me last week that for the first time, 2 weeks had gone by, she didn't put gas in the car, so she was very excited. This is very typical of these people with the plug-in hybrids, to have a sort of a game to see how they can manage not to put gas in their car.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's a bit of a stepping stone. If you can manage with 50, you think at some point, well, if I had 350, oh my God, I could manage perfectly fine. So, I'm not against these plug-in hybrids as a stepping stone to sort of work towards all
Yeah.
electric.
Well, as an EV driver myself, I find it makes me a smarter driver. I think a little bit more instead of just getting in the car and driving. You're just thinking a little bit more about the drive. You're actually enjoying a little bit more of your surroundings because if you have to stop, for 10 minutes or 30 minutes to charge the car, you're taking advantage. You're slowing down a little bit. You're kind of enjoying the drive. Uh, It's a different philosophy that it took a real shift, but now I love it.
Yeah,
You know,
it was very interesting when I first went to get the car. I thought, okay, well, how many kilometers do I drive in a day? If you'd have asked me, I had no idea.
exactly.
I had to spend a week or two figuring out whether this was making any sense or not. And there was a whole bunch of things that I had to go through in my mind. I think it's a little easier now than it was 7 or 8 years ago. But yeah, I didn't. When I explained to non-EV drivers, they ask, "Okay, how long does it take to fill the whole battery?" I said, "When's the last time you drove 600 kilometers in one day?"
Yeah.
Right? You and I know, right? We have exactly what you're saying. We have a slightly different way of thinking, and
Yeah.
it takes time to figure this out, right?
Yeah, and once you get past that, then you're really enjoying it. It's the journey and the destination. I guess you're enjoying. Um,
Let alone some of the things that the car can do, some of the self-driving features that we
oh,
have and
I love
that
the
make it a
speed.
bit easier, and some of the features that you and I even the I we the braking it's unbelievable the fact that you almost never need to use the brakes in my car is amazing, right?
Yeah, it
And
is.
the regenerative braking.
Now, when you first get a new car, a lot of you're given some connectors. You're giving some, like a CCS and a CHAdeMO and an NACS, which is like the Tesla one. Each one of these are different. When you go to for non EV drivers who are out there, these connectors mean different things, right?
Connectors are amazingly difficult for people to figure out. I have literally stood because we do service for EV chargers. So sometimes I'll stand at a public charger and I am amazed because at how difficult it is for people to understand where to pull up, what charger, what adapter to use. I see them doing all kinds of odd things. I see them pick up the cable, stand in front of this charger, but pick the cable up from the charger behind. Like I
Yeah.
get how confusing this is, but I think we're on the right path. And I'll do this a little bit of the what are the connectors part of it. Most cars, at least up until now, have come with what we call a J1772. This
Right.
is sort of the typical connector that fits in that comes with the level 2 charger. The cable's already there, plugs in the car, and we're good to go. Tesla uses something different, which was called an NACS. It's now got a definition. It's a J3400. So the other one's 1772, the new one's 3400. And people that had the Tesla vehicles that wanted to use the J1772 from all the other ones, a little adapter came with the car.
Right.
It doesn't come with the car anymore. You have to buy it, but it's not very expensive.
Hmm.
And most of us keep it in our car so that we can have the opportunity to use that. So that means that anything that has a J1772 will be able to use with all cars. We put tons of these in condominiums, and it's very common. So that's the level 1, level 2 kind of charging.
Hmm.
When you get to level 3, we're delivering DC, it's not necessarily the same connector. Tesla uses the same connector. The same one that goes for the AC is exactly the same one that goes for the DC. Very easy to use, nothing needed. Everybody else is using either CHAdeMO, which was a sort of a Chinese type of a connector what Nissan was using, or the CCS combo connector that it's called, the CCS. So the CCS was more available. I think the CHAdeMO is pretty much gone now.
Yeah.
Even Nissan is changing it, so I think this is going to disappear. And we all thought that we were going to end up with this either Tesla chargers or the combo. And then one day we woke up in the morning and Ford said, you know what? We're going to change our connectors on our cars. We're going to make them all the NACS. That was the definition at the time. And it's going to give us access to the Tesla superchargers. Clearly, some deal was made in the background,
Yeah.
and that changed everything on the landscape. That happened, I don't remember exactly, maybe 6 months ago or something. And suddenly, within about 2 weeks, first of all, every charger manufacturer, there was a day that, 19 charger manufacturers announced that they were going to make this cable available on their charger. And almost every single, I think now at this point now, every manufacturer has gotten on board because there was really no other choice.
Mm.
Means that as we move forward in the next couple of years, we may find that every vehicle comes with the same connector. This is going to make things much easier.
Oh,
So we're looking
forever.
maybe to buy I'd like to buy another vehicle for our service fleet. And I was a little hesitant because I didn't necessarily want a Tesla because some of our manufacturers would like us to plug directly into the car without an adapter. So we might buy an F-150 because if I buy an F-150 Lightning, I should be able to use the Tesla chargers, which means I'll have lots of choice,
Mm.
but I'll still be able to plug in directly. So suddenly this is a whole new change and an interesting thing. So I think this is probably one of the main changes we've needed to really move this EV adoption forward.
Mm.
Right? You couldn't imagine how difficult it would be if you went to gas station, and there were 3 or 4 different kinds of
Yeah,
connectors, and you had to make sure you parked your car at the right plug. It just sounds crazy.
it
So
does.
I'm hoping this is going to be a big step forward. I'm pretty excited about it. And
Is
it caught everybody by surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely it did. And but I think that's just the fluctuations that we're seeing in the industry right now. People are they're adapting and evolving, and it's amazing how we're seeing all this unfold. Is there a portable way to charge an electric car?
There, i- there are some kinds of things. There's a company, as an example, called Spark Charge. So Spark Charge makes like batteries that you could
Mhm.
you it's like a little Lego set. You could charge the battery, plug it in, and then they can, because the batteries are heavy, you could stack one on top of the other. So you could ultimately take these, put them in the back of a car, and take them to another car to charge. But it's not. I'm not 100% sure that there's a giant need for this. I'm sure people ask you the same thing. Well, what do you do when you run out of electricity?
Mm.
And you go, I don't run out of electricity. It doesn't.
You
That's
plan
not the
for
way.
it ahead of time.
Yeah, I don't. The same that if you were
Run out of
if
gas.
you were down, yeah, if you were down to an eighth of a tank and you were hitting the last part of your journey, and it was some dusty road in the backwoods, you would fill up before you got on there, because you know enough to make you sensible decisions. And it's a rarity that people run out of. So we don't really, but I know people are trying all kinds of things. They have them. You could put a pretty big truck mounted battery. I
Mm.
just don't know, to be quite honest with you, that while it's not impossible, that there's a demand. And then, of course, the idea to put say, a diesel generator on the back of a vehicle to charge a battery, to charge an electric car, this sounds like the opposite of everything we're trying to do for the environment. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, we'll see how this works out. Listen, we have the automobile associations that do rescue people. Maybe there is there's a place for that, but you and I know that not too many of us are finding ourselves with no electricity. That just mostly isn't happening. And keep in mind that even if the electricity stopped at your house and you couldn't charge there, you could drive the vehicle somewhere else where there was electricity. There are options for you.
There
So
are.
yeah, so the answer is yes, and we'll see how. I wouldn't wait too much for that to happen.
Recently, you attended Project Arrow's unveiling. Um, for everybody who doesn't quite know, tell us a little bit about that. What is Project Arrow?
So it's interesting that this was a while ago that got unveiled, and Project Arrow is continuing into a second iteration now. So the idea was to find a way for the automobile parts manufacturers to showcase what Canadian talent was, and they brought together. They said, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build a car, and we're going to build an electric vehicle, and we're going to allow all the people that are making these pieces or those pieces of the car. The car was amazing. It had like I think a maple floor inside to give it that Canadian feel. It's very impressive. And they went to the schools were the technical schools here in Ontario were part of what was involved in building this, and they felt that they could take the car with them to places and showcase. The purpose wasn't to showcase the car, but to showcase the talent of Canadian manufacturers, and it works quite well. People were very impressed, and they wanted to connect that with other manufacturers, so that if you were looking for somebody to make a dashboard or a steering wheel or a particular component, whatever it was, seats, and they had all kinds of monitors. They were looking at electronics monitors that would monitor in case you had a heart attack, that it would be able to sense your pulse, realize that something was wrong, and then safely move the car over, and then make a phone call to emergency services. Like all these things, they wanted to showcase all this in one package. So it was quite impressive. It was unveiled a few years ago at the automobile show here in Toronto. And now we're moving. They announced just recently they're moving to a second generation. They're going to do something similar again. I think they have really the one vehicle at the moment. So I mean, this is great. We have a lot of great Canadian talent, a lot of great Canadian manufacturers. Automobile manufacturing has been a big part, and certainly in Ontario's certainly all Ontario in particular is where I live. Is the government's all in for battery man. We're going to be one of the largest manufacturers of batteries in the world. So this is a combination of having, I believe, the right the government thinking the right way, some of this infrastructure here already, and not being very far from the mining. They want to connect all these pieces together and make it into a finished product.
Recent news has told us that EV adoption is cooling a little bit. What are your thoughts on this?
First of all, this is a very hard thing to do. Uh, uh, Car sales in general ebb and flow. And I think everybody is always looking to see that how the naysayers always want to say, "Oh, look, it's not working now. People aren't buying EVs." Some of it's just a change in the marketplace. But the other thing is, when you say that to me, I think you're thinking, well, in your backyard, like in Canada and in the US, things seem to be quiet, slow. The adoption's not very good. Except if we look, adoption is not car manufacturers don't manufacture cars for one area. They manufacture cars for the whole world.
Mhm.
So if you went to Norway as an example, and I think you already know this, that adoption there is at 91.5% now. So you would see a completely different arrangement. And even in Canada, if you went to BC or to Quebec, where the government is really behind these things, you'll see way more vehicles. I think, and I mean, there's people are saying that this coming year is actually going to be a very good year for vehicles. We have new vehicles coming out um, from manufacturers that we hadn't seen the quantity of them, the different kinds and different price ranges. So
Mm.
I don't think. And listen, it doesn't seem at all possible to me that this clock is somehow going to stop or turn back and somebody will go, you know what, we really made a mistake. These gasoline burning vehicles, this was the state of the art. I can't believe that we imagined to go to electric vehicles. It's impossible. It's just, I think for both for you and I, this has moved slower than we thought it would. We always think we're in it. We think it's great, and
Yeah.
we can't imagine why everybody else isn't. But once we reach past people that are have home charging, it's a little more challenging. What are they going to do? How are they going to charge it? So we're in that sort of second phase. I think things like we talked about, the NACS connector and better public charging, and everybody, now that the cars are there, making the batteries better, making the range better, making the charging faster, making everything easier, all of this will come together. If I could tell you tomorrow that you could charge your car exactly the way you filled it with gas, that on every fourth corner there's going to be a place to charge. It'll only take you 5 minutes. There is no possible way that you would buy a gasoline car because it doesn't make any sense at all. The maintenance is far too high. There's too much oil changes, let alone the God help me that we're moving from burning fossil fuels. I mean, this is almost secondary to some people, but the whole thing is better. I just need to get this piece into their heads and get this working. And people can't build better batteries and better charging if they don't have customers. And now we're getting enough customers. So it's always a little bit of a chicken and egg,
Mhm.
and it has its moments where it gets a little slower. But I really don't see any other possibility. But for this, it's certainly in the for people's cars. Large trucking may be a different story. We may have to figure out other ways, or that may adapt over time as well. People are working on it, but for the cars, I think the ship has sailed already. We're absolutely going in that direction, and I wouldn't worry about what it seems to you like a temporary slowdown. And I don't, to be perfectly honest with you, uh, don't believe everything you hear in the news. The news has a particular bent that they want to talk about. Not every car catches on fire. Like it's just
Yeah.
if if it bleeds, it leads, right? So I, I think we have to take and certainly in China, the cars are there's an unbelievable adoption of vehicles that you just don't see them because they haven't worked out here, come here because of tariffs and other things.
Mhm.
But this is going to work itself out.
Awesome.
Awesome, awesome.
Awesome. Well, it will. It thinks, yes, I agree to everything you've said. I love how passionate you are. I, it's nice to meet somebody who is as passionate as I am about all this. And it was a pleasure talking to you today, Mark. And I
Good.
wish you all
I'm
the
so happy
best.
that you reached out, and I hope there was some value in this to the audience. We talked about level one, level two. We talked about the NECS connector, and we talked about the possibilities of how to think about getting an EV. So if we're part of a bit of the solution to moving this forward, and you and I'll talk next year, and we'll go, oh, you were right. 2024 was a fantastic year
It was.
for EVs,
It was.
right?
And the adoption rate is gone back up again. So yeah, we're
That's
all
it. That'll be it. Oh, you were right, Mark. We were right. We were right.
good. Listen, okay, well, we will be chatting again, and but yeah, keep up the great work and the public education, and best wishes with your YouTube channel as well.
No problem, and to you as well, Maria. That everybody that's doing this and bringing this to the public is helping and to some extent maybe even entertaining, right?
I agree.
Great. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye bye.
So, what did you think about that? Thank you, Mark. It was really great to talk to you. I love your energy and enthusiasm. It's totally contagious. And I really hope that this podcast served you if you're doing your homework or education about EVs. And I think the industry, it's moving forward and it's happening. So the more you know, the more educated you are. And Mark's YouTube channel, I'm going to give another plug for that because he shares a lot of great content. And it's in a way that he really spells everything out for you. I'm your host, Maria McGowan. I thank you for joining me today. This podcast is sponsored by the Smart Energy event. There's one in Halifax, and now there's a new one even in Vancouver, which is really totally cool. So make sure you register or check those conferences out. But in the meantime, thanks again for following along, and we'll see you next time.